Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about using estimation to solve problems. Oftentimes, especially on the Keystone exam, they will ask you to give an estimate. Or they'll say about how much or some wording like that. And that tells you that it's going to be an estimation problem. Estimation can make complex problems much easier. And the reason is because we can round the numbers that we're given and then use those rounded numbers when we're doing our calculations, which often makes it a lot easier. So let's do a little bit of review of rounding really quickly before we go into some example problems. Let's start with the number 125. So in case you don't remember, right, this is our hundreds place. The 1 is our hundreds place. The next is our tens place. And the last number there is our ones place. And remember, when we're rounding, we're always going to look at the place we're rounding to. We're going to look at the number to the right of that. So for example, in 125, if I'm rounding to the tens place, then what I'm going to be looking at is the ones place. And I'm going to look at that number in the ones place. And so the rule of thumb, if you don't remember, is if the number is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, you round up. If the number is 1, 2, 3, 4, or 0, throw 0 in there, you round down. Okay, so because 5 is in this first group, that means the 2 is going to round up to a 3. So 125 is about 130. And so we have to make sure that we put a 0 in that ones place because we're rounding, right? It's just an estimate. Let's go ahead and try 1,432. And let's say this time we're rounding to the hundreds place. So in this case, I'm rounding to the hundreds place. Again, I'm going to look to the digit, the number directly to the right of that, which is the tens place. That's a 3. So that's going to round down. And so I'll end up with 1,400. Okay, and again, I put a 0 in that tens place and the ones place to give me my estimate in hundreds. Let's try one more. Let's say we have 2,748. And let's say in this case, I want to round to the thousands place. Well, if I'm rounding to the thousands place, then I'm going to look to the number directly to the right of that. That's a 7. 7 is in that first group, right? So that rounds up. And so the 2 goes up to a 3, and that gives me 3,000. So that's just a quick little review of rounding. And typically we will always follow those rules. Now let me throw in kind of a little bit of a disclaimer there. When you're dealing with problems having to do with money, we often round the numbers. We will always round all the prices up just to make sure that we have enough money to pay for all of the items. So when we're dealing with money and cost of things, always round all of those numbers up. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our first example. It says, Mr. Jenkins is taking Mrs. Jenkins and their 3 children to lunch and a movie. A lunch special costs $9.75 per person. Matinee movie tickets cost $8.50 each, and the cost for parking is $6.25. About, there's our key word there, about how much money will Mr. Jenkins need to take his family to lunch and a movie? Okay, so we're trying to figure out how much money, about how much money. So we're going to go ahead and round all of these numbers first. So let's say $9.75. Remember, with money, we always want to round up. So that's going to be about $10. And then we have $8.50. And when we round that up, that rounds to $9. And then we have $6.25. And when we round that up, again, because it's money, we always round up. That is about $7. Okay, so there are a total of 5 of them, right? Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins and their 3 children. So a lunch special costs $9.75 per person. So $10 per person, and there's 5 of them. So that is a total of $50. And they each need to get a ticket for the movie. So we've got $9 for each ticket, and there's 5 of them. That's another $45. And they're all coming in one car, right? It's not like they're each coming in separate cars. So we'll just add the $7 for parking to that. And if we add all those up, that comes out to $102. So Mr. Jenkins will need about $102 to take his family to lunch and a movie. Pretty pricey, lunch and a movie. But anyway, so that's how you're going to approach that one. Let's look at problem number 2. A train travels at an average speed of 67.8 miles per hour, mph. About how many hours will it take the train to travel 276 miles? And there's that word about again. And that tells us that we're going to be using estimation. So once again, we're going to round the numbers first, then we'll use an equation to identify our numbers and perform our calculations. So let's go ahead and start with 67.8, and that's going to round up to about 70 miles per hour. And we're going to say, well, 276, let's round that up to a more manageable number, right? Something that's easier to work with. So we'll round that up to 280 miles. Okay, now you might say, well, how do I know that I'm not supposed to round that up to 300? The reason is because 280 is an easy enough number to work with. 280 and 70, you don't need to round up to 300 because then that's not very close to the actual amount, right? 280 is going to be a better estimate because it's much closer to the actual number of miles. Okay, so we are going to look at the distance formula. The distance formula is rate times time. Not something that we really talked about much this year, but that is the distance formula. You would have learned that probably last year. Okay, so distance equals rate times time. And that should make sense, right? If I travel 60 miles per hour for an hour, I've gone 60 miles, right? 60 miles per hour, and I travel for an entire hour, I've gone 60 miles. That's what this formula says. So in our case, we have a rate of 70 miles per hour, and our distance is 280. We're trying to figure out the time, about how many hours. So we're solving this equation for t. Okay, to solve for t, then we're just going to divide both sides by 70, and we get t is about 4 hours. So another example of how you can do one of these estimation problems. I have a couple more examples for you. A family traveled 1,216.3 miles by car. The car got an average of 31.8 miles per gallon. Gasoline costs an average of $3.89 per gallon. About how much money did the family spend on gasoline for the trip? Okay, there's that about again. So let's go ahead and round all of our numbers. So we've got 1,216.3. That's going to round to about, again, we want to use something that's relatively easy to work with. So that's about 1,200 miles. The car got an average of 31.8 miles per gallon. That's about 30 mpg, miles per gallon. This was miles. And the price was $3.89 per gallon, which, remember, when we're dealing with price, we always round up, and that would be about $4 per gallon. Another way you can look at the rounding is if you have something in the thousands, you're going to round to the hundreds place. Here we have the tenths, so we're going to round to the ones place. Here we have we're just going to round this to the nearest dollar when you're dealing with money. Okay, so that might help a little bit with the whole rounding thing. Okay, so let's see. If they traveled about 1,200 miles and they get 30 miles per gallon, if I divide that by 30 miles per gallon, that's going to come out to a total of 40 gallons. Okay, so think about that again. They travel 1,200 miles. They get 30 miles for every gallon of gas. So if I divide 1,200 by 30, that gives me a total of 40 gallons. That's how much gas they used on the trip. And now we can say, well, if they used 40 gallons and it cost them $4 for every gallon, that costs them a total of about $160. Okay, so here you had to do two calculations. You had to start with the whole idea of, first of all, how many gallons was it, and then you had to figure out the cost from there. Okay, one more example. A painter is making a cost estimate for repainting the surface of a dome. Total area of 2,912 square feet. A gallon of paint costs $38.27 and covers an average of 350 square feet per coat. About how much money will all the paint cost if he uses 2 coats of paint? Okay, so here we go. 2912 is going to round to about 2,900. 3827, we always round our money up. We should always round it up when we're talking about the cost of things. So in this case, we'll call that $39. And let's see, it says, okay, we have those. The other numbers we don't need to round because they're all in good shape. So let's first determine the approximate number of gallons needed for 2 coats. So if I have 2,900 and 2,900 square feet and a gallon of paint, or 350 square feet per coat, if I divide that by 350, that comes out to be 8 gallons. Let me see. Yeah, 8 gallons per coat. So I just pulled up my calculator and I did 2,900 divided by 350. That comes out to 8.28, right? So again, we're rounding. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if there's 2,900 square feet that need to be covered, and let's see, a gallon of paint covers an average of 350 square feet per coat, I need 8 gallons to do 1 coat of paint. Okay, I need 8 gallons if I'm only doing 1 coat. But because I want 2 coats, I need double that, so I need 16 gallons of paint. Okay, now the paint costs 16 gallons and it costs $39 per gallon, roughly. So that means my cost is going to be about, let me get my calculator, 16 times 39, and that comes out to be about $624. So $624. So that's how you're going to go about doing these estimation problems. Again, make sure you round everything first, then perform your calculations after that. Okay, everybody, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.